The wind carried more than just sand that morning. It carried shame, it carried silence, and it carried the cry of a girl who no longer had a name. They called her Sahira, though it was not the name her mother had whispered into her hair at birth. That name had been erased the day her father was buried with dishonor, and her mother burned herself in protest beneath a dying neem tree. Ever since then, Sahira had been no one. Not a daughter, not a sister. Just the orphaned shame of a feud gone bitter. She stood barefoot at the edge of the caravan track, sunburnt and thirsty, with only a torn scarf and her dead mother's copper bracelet. Her uncle had thrown her out just before dawn, dragging her by the braid, tossing her bundle onto the dust, like a merchant discarding spoiled goods. "You're cursed," he'd said. "Your father betrayed our blood, and you carry his sin in your bones." Sahira had not cried then, but she was crying now, quietly, into the folds of her scarf. Not because she was afraid of dying, but because no one would know she had lived. That was when the hooves came. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. She looked up with swollen eyes and saw a man riding a black horse through the heat haze. His beard was thick. His clothes rough, stitched by hand. He looked like a man used to carrying things heavier than guilt. His name was Rehan Malik, the struggling rancher, widowed, wordless, and for reasons only known to God, he stopped his horse when he saw her. "What's your name?" he asked, voice dry like old bark. She hesitated. I don't have one anymore." He dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the thirsty soil. "You'll need one if you plan to stay alive." She shook her head. "I wasn't planning to." He didn't speak for a long time, just studied her face like a man might study a scar he almost remembers getting. Then he said, "I've got no wife, no daughters, no animals left to milk, only dust and 4 dying goats. But if you can work, and if you don't steal, you can come." That was it. No sympathy, no kindness in his eyes. Just a door opened, halfway. Sahira followed him. The villagers watched from behind cracked windows. Whispers traveled faster than the wind. He took her in? That cursed girl? But no one dared confront him. Rehan Malik had fought a bear with a sickle once, and they said he didn't scream even when it broke his ribs. That night, she slept on a mat beside the goats. She didn't mind. She was safe. Or so she thought, because 3 days later her uncle, the same man who had banished her, rode into Rehan's ranch, falling at his feet with bloody hands and a desperate voice. "I need your help," he begged. "They've taken my son. Please, please help me." And Sahira stood behind the door, heart pounding. The man who wanted her dead had come begging to the man who had saved her. And Rehan? He looked at her once, just once, and then turned to her uncle with eyes that had seen too much. Rehan stood silent for a long while. The desert sun burned his shoulders. Sahira stood behind the half-open barn door watching. Her uncle, Haji, Maz, was on his knees, trembling, not from shame, but from fear. A fear only a father knows when his only son vanishes into the claws of men who know no law. "They took him last night," Maz whispered. "From the camel trail. Said it's blood for blood. I have no one left to ask. Please, Rehan Malik, you're the only one they still fear." Rehan didn't blink. He scratched his beard. "And what would you give in return, Haji Maz?" Anything. My land, my house." "No," Rehan interrupted. "You'll give something else. You'll tell the truth." Maz stiffened. "About what?" "About what happened to her father." Sahira's breath caught. The wind stilled. Even the goats outside stopped chewing. Maz's lips trembled. "That's buried dust, Rehan. Why dig it up? Because lies don't rot like corpses, Rayhan said coldly. They live in the bones of the innocent. Maz's face paled, but he said nothing. Rayhan turned and walked back to the barn. He looked at Sahira, truly looked at her, as if finally measuring the weight she carried. "You want me to save his son?" he asked her, his voice like thunder wrapped in cloth. Sahira didn't answer at first. The part of her that wanted revenge was loud, but louder still was the voice of her mother, who had once said in the dim light of an oil lamp, "No matter how dark the night, don't let your heart become the thing you hate." She nodded once. "Save him," she said quietly, "but don't forget." By sundown, Rayhan had gathered his old rifle and his tattered turban. The kidnappers were a band of desert raiders, half tribe, half outlaw, led by Qadir Zal, a man Rayhan once called brother. As Rayhan saddled his black horse, Sahira approached him. "You knew my father?" she asked suddenly. Rayhan paused. "Yes. What was he like?" Rayhan's eyes softened for a second, then hardened again. He loved too boldly and trusted the wrong man. Sahira understood. She didn't need to hear more. That wrong man was likely her uncle. The desert stretched wide and cruel under the rising moon. Rayhan rode through the dust like a man, riding into his own past. When he reached the raiders' outpost, he didn't sneak. He walked straight into the firelight. Qadir Zal rose from his wooden seat, grinning. "You've got sand in your veins, Malik. Still breathing?" Rayhan looked around. "Where's the boy?" Qadir gestured lazily. "Tied in the tent. Bit of a crybaby. You want him?" "I do." "Then leave your gun and tell me why the cursed girl is in your house." The fire crackled. Rayhan didn't flinch. "Because even cursed girls deserve water when they're dying." Qadir laughed. "You always were the fool with a heart." But Rayhan didn't smile. He stepped forward. And then the fight began. Not with fists, but with truths. Because just as Qadir ordered his men to seize, "Rayhan," a voice called out from behind the dunes. It was Sahira. She had followed. And in her trembling hands was a letter. Her father's last message, hidden beneath floorboards, found by accident while sweeping. She read it aloud, her voice breaking. "If I die, it won't be by strangers. It will be by Maz, who envies my honor. Rayhan is the only man I trust. Tell him the truth, if you live." The camp fell silent. Even Qadir Zal didn't laugh now. Maz had betrayed not only blood, but honor. And now, his own son's life was bargaining against a truth long buried. The fire crackled between them, casting crooked shadows across the sand. Sahira's voice had fallen silent, but her words still rang in the air like the echo of a gunshot. Rayhan stood still, eyes fixed on Qadir Zal, who now stared at the letter. In disbelief. Around them, the raiders shifted uneasily, men who robbed for bread and fought for names, but even they understood what it meant to spill blood unjustly. To betray your own kin was to salt your soul forever. "She speaks the truth," Qadir finally muttered. We all heard it. Rayhan didn't move. He didn't shout. He only looked toward the small canvas tent nearby. "Bring the boy," he said. 2 men obeyed, dragging out a bruised and barefoot teenager, Haji Maz's son, barely 16, his mouth gagged and wrists bound. When he saw Rayhan, his swollen eyes widened with a flicker of hope. But Sahira didn't step forward. She looked away. Rayhan cut the ropes, pulled the boy to his feet, and turned to Qadir. "Your quarrel is with Maz," he said, "not the son." Qadir narrowed his eyes. "And what would you have me do? Let the boy walk while the father still breathes?" Rayhan's voice was low, controlled. "I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for balance. Then he said something no one expected. "You can have my land in exchange." Sahira gasped. Even Qadir blinked. "Your land?" the outlaw said. "Your ranch?" "I won't need it," Rehan said. "Not anymore." Qadir walked in a slow circle around the fire, thinking, calculating. The Malik Ranch was cursed land to some, but to others, it held the last wellspring under the southern hill. The drought had spared that corner of the desert, and water was worth more than gold in these days. He finally grinned. "Deal, but only because it's you, Malik." They shook hands. Rehan handed the boy over, helped him onto a borrowed mule, and turned to Sahira. "We leave now." They rode through the night in silence. Rehan said nothing about the deal. Sahira didn't ask, but she watched him, how his back stayed straight, even as pain carved into his eyes. How he didn't speak of what he had lost, only of what had to be done next. By dawn, they arrived at the edge of the village. People came out from their huts, curious. Whispers grew like weeds. Rehan brought the boy back. "They say he gave up his ranch for Maz's son. He's lost his mind. She's cursed, and now she's taken everything from him." Haji Maz stumbled out of his compound, weeping with joy, hugging his son. But when he saw Sahira beside Rehan, his face darkened. "You," he muttered. "You followed them? You read that letter?" Sahira didn't reply, but Rehan did. She read it. They all heard it. "And if you ever raise your hand to her again, I swear by the grave of your own brother, I'll bury you beside him." Maz looked around, at the villagers now murmuring, at the truth swirling like a storm ready to break open. But Rehan wasn't done. He turned to the elders who had gathered near the prayer stones. "I am no longer the owner of the Malik Ranch," he said simply. "I gave it to save that boy." The elders gasped. Rehan went on. "I have no home, no livestock, no field, only one request." He pointed to Sahira. "She is not cursed. She is not a stain. She will live in my care, and she will not be touched. If any man disagrees, then take it up with me now, while I still draw breath." Silence. Even the wind stopped to listen. One by one, the elders lowered their eyes. The truth had roots now. It could not be dug up and hidden anymore. Maz stood there, shaking with rage and humiliation, but helpless. Rehan turned and walked away, and Sahira followed him down the narrow trail. They moved into a small abandoned hut near the edge of the southern ridge. No more goats, no more fields, just cracked clay walls, a broken roof, and the company of stars. Sahira tried to protest. "You gave up everything? For him? For his son?" Rehan just shrugged. "Not for him. For you." She looked away, voice low. "I don't deserve that." Rehan didn't answer. He looked up at the sky. "Some people give curses," he said. "Others carry them." Then he added almost to himself, "But I've seen enough to know. Those who carry them are the ones who end up saving everyone else." 3 moons passed. The desert winds changed. Rehan and Sahira lived quietly in the forgotten hut beyond, the southern ridge. They ate little, spoke less, and worked side by side under the unrelenting sun. The ranch was gone. Rehan had no servants, no livestock, no shade to offer. But the silence was peaceful, until the night, the sky broke open. Tiu came with the monsoon. Lightning split the clouds after years of drought. The winds roared like wild beasts, and Sahira ran outside, arms raised in awe. For the first time in years she laughed, real laughter, light and unburdened. "It's rain, Rehan!" she cried. "Rain!" Rehan didn't answer. He was watching her. The storm drenched the hills. Water slid down the rock faces and filled old cracks with silver. The parched soil of the desert drank eagerly. For miles, the land came alive. But not every man found joy in the rain. In the heart of the village, Haji Maz sat under his collapsing roof, watching the same clouds, but with envy boiling in his chest. He had lost something no one saw. His fear over Rayhan had become humiliation. He could not walk through the market without hearing the whispers. The rancher gave up everything for the girl Maz tried to bury. Even the cursed girl was more loyal than her uncle. His son was saved by the very man he betrayed. Maz's pride rotted, and when pride rots, it strikes. One afternoon, weeks later, as the storm gave way to heat again, Sahira walked to the old well alone. Rayhan had gone to the mountains to buy dry flour from a traveling merchant. She carried a clay pot, humming to herself. The road was quiet, but she didn't see the shadow behind the rocks. Maz emerged slowly, breathing like a man chasing ghosts. Sahira froze. He wore a long shawl and held something sharp in his right hand. "I should have finished you when—" "I had the chance," he spat. She didn't flinch. "You already buried me once," she whispered. "What more do you want?" "My name back," he hissed. "My honor. You stole it." "I didn't steal it," she said. "You threw it away." He lunged, but he didn't reach her. A blur of motion swept between them. Rayhan, having returned early, tackled Maz to the ground. The blade flew from his hand. A struggle. A dust storm of fists and limbs. But Rayhan did not kill him. He stood over the broken man, fists clenched, chest heaving. "Strike me," Maz growled. "Kill me like a dog and show them what kind of man you really are." But Rayhan stepped back. "No," he said softly. "I'll show them something better." By evening, the whole village gathered at the mosque's courtyard. Rayhan stood at the center, bruised, dusty, but unbroken. Sahira sat nearby, hands folded, lips sealed. He raised his voice. "I've bled for this village. I've lost my land, my name, my place, for a girl no one wanted to protect." He looked at Maz, who sat, wrists bound, head lowered. "But today I show mercy, not because he deserves it, but because I do." Gasps, murmurs. A woman sobbed near the back. Then Rayhan said something that stunned everyone. "I offer Haji Maz a place in the outer lands near my old ranch. I will even build him a hut myself. But on one condition, he will never raise his hand or voice again toward any woman, ever, not even to shout." Elder Abbas, the oldest man in the village, rose slowly and came forward. "I've lived through 2 wars, he said. "I've seen brave men and foolish ones. But today I see something rarer." He pointed at Rayhan. "Greatness." Then he turned to the villagers. "And let it be known from this day, Sahira bint Karim is no longer cursed. She is blessed." Silence fell like a shroud, and then applause. Soft at first, then louder. Sahira looked up, and for the first time since her father died, she didn't feel invisible. Weeks passed. Rayhan built Maz's hut, just as he said, and Sahira planted a garden in the dry soil beside their home. The desert had given her nothing but thorns, until one man gave her water, shelter, and dignity. One evening, under the stars, Sahira said, softly, "You gave everything for me, Rayhan, even your land. Why?" Rayhan looked up from his small fire. His eyes were quiet storms. "Because I've seen men feed goats better than they treat women. And I swore, if I ever had a daughter, I'd never let her suffer like that." Sahira blinked. "But I'm not your daughter." He smiled faintly. "No, You're not. A pause. Then she asked, Then who am I? Rayhan didn't answer, right away. Instead, he handed her the last fig from a tree they planted together, and as she bit into its sweetness, he whispered, You're proof that kindness always returns. The winds that once howled through the dry ridges now moved softly, like they, too, were tired of fighting. Life had begun to bloom again. The fig trees Rayhan planted with Sahira pushed shy green leaves from the brittle soil. Villagers who once crossed the road to avoid them now paused to nod a greeting. Some even brought sugar, spices, or broken tools to mend, using them as excuses to come and sit near Rayhan's quiet fire. But it was not forgiveness Sahira sought. It was peace. And that peace, she believed, had finally settled into her bones. She had started teaching 3 young girls from the village how to read and write in the mornings under the shade of an old mulberry tree. She used the broken chalkboard Rayhan found in the ruins of the old mosque school. The girls, barefoot and wild-haired, giggled when she spoke sternly and tried to hide their slates when she checked their work. It's like being a mother, Sahira had once said, almost to herself. Rayhan, who had been mending a saddle nearby, looked up and replied, You're more than that. You're the voice they never had. But the past has long arms, and it reached for her just when she thought she had escaped. It was late evening when the stranger came. His horse was lean, tired, its hooves cracked. Dust clung to his robes like old secrets. His eyes scanned the village with a knowing calm, as though he'd been here before. Sahira saw him from the garden. He rode slowly, dismounted at the well, and knelt to drink. The villagers gave him space. Something about him was unsettling. Silent men often are. She turned away. But then she heard it. Her name. Not the cursed nickname they used to hiss behind her back. Her real name. Sahira bint Karim. She froze. When she turned, the man was standing near the old prayer stones, and in his hand was her father's brass ring. Her breath caught. That ring had been taken from her father's hand the night he was killed. She walked forward slowly, heart pounding. The man nodded, his voice grave and clear. I was there the night your father died. The crowd that had begun to gather fell into a hush. I was one of the caravan guards meant to protect him, but we failed. Rayhan appeared beside her, silent as a hawk. The man continued. Your father's trade route was ambushed by bandits, but it wasn't a random attack. It was planned. Sahira's voice trembled. Planned? Yes, someone gave them your father's route, schedule, and the map of every hidden stash he carried. And that someone lived in this village. Gasps rippled. Rayhan stepped forward. Speak clearly, traveler. This is no place for riddles. The man looked Rayhan dead in the eyes. I've come to name the traitor who killed Karim Khan. Sahira gripped Rayhan's arm. Who? She whispered. The man's voice dropped. Haji Maz. A stunned silence, then shouting, then denial. But something had shifted. The traveler removed a folded letter from his robe. I kept this for years. I didn't want to get involved. But when I heard that Rayhan Malik gave up his ranch to save that man's son, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Handed the letter to Rayhan. It bore Karim Khan's seal, and instructions written in his own hand, naming the route, the stash, the trust he placed in his younger cousin, Maz. Sahira collapsed to her knees. Rayhan didn't speak. He only reached out and gently placed the ring in Sahira's palm. That night, the village elders gathered under moonlight. They read the letter aloud. The truth echoed across the courtyard. It was no longer just a story about honor and shame. It was betrayal, premeditated, deliberate, cold. Maz was summoned. He came, limping, face drawn. When the elders presented the evidence, he didn't speak. He simply wept. "Why?" Elder Abbas asked. "I wanted the caravan for myself," Maz whispered. "I thought Kareem would fail. I never meant for him to die." Rayhan's face was unreadable. Sahira stood. "Even now you don't say his name," she said. "You say I never meant for him to die, like it was an accident. But you gave him away." Maz tried to fall at her feet, but she stepped back. "I forgive you," she said, her voice shaking. "But not for you. For me. So I can breathe again." Then she turned and walked away into the dark. At dawn, Rayhan found her by the ridge, staring at the dry riverbed. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. He sat beside her. "The world won't always reward your forgiveness," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But if I carry this bitterness, I'll be the one rotting inside." They sat in silence. A lark called out, across the stones. Then Sahira spoke, not to Rayhan, but to the wind. "I will not let the man who betrayed my father write the end of my story." And Rayhan, quietly, nodded. 3 days passed. The village had turned upside down. The truth about Maz spread faster than wildfire. Those who once feared him now crossed the street to avoid the shame in his eyes. His son, Zahid, refused to speak, even to his own mother. The market boys stopped chanting his name, and the mosque, once guarded by his loud prayers, now stood quiet at sunset. Sahira didn't attend the judgment. She couldn't. Instead, she went to the ridge, sat where her father once camped, and waited for the wind to tell her how to feel. But it said nothing. Until the messenger boy arrived. A timid knock, a scroll, an old seal. She opened it slowly, and her breath caught in her chest. It was her father's handwriting, the final page of his travel journal. "If I do not return, let this letter find Sahira someday. I write with the fear that my cousin, Maz, has grown too hungry for what is not his. If I fall, my only wish is for Sahira to live free, with dignity, with no one to command her but her own heart. And if she finds someone kind enough to shelter her, not with gold or power but with silence and sacrifice, then she has found what even I could not. Let her marry only if she chooses. Let her live only as she pleases. And let no man, not even in my name, trap her again." She read the words twice, then 3 times, and then she wept, not from grief, but from release. That evening, the elders came to Rayhan's doorstep. "He must be punished," said one. "But we cannot kill an old man with a broken leg and a shattered name," said another. "What punishment then?" someone asked. Elder Abbas looked at Rayhan. "You lost your ranch for protecting Sahira. You gave more than any man. It is your right to decide his fate." Rayhan stepped back. "No. That right belongs to her." They all turned to look at Sahira. And in that moment, with dusk bleeding across the sky and the mountains bowing under the last light, she made a decision that would echo for generations. "Banish him," she said, "but not in chains. Let him leave with nothing but his shame. Let the world see him walk, limping and alone, as a warning carved into dust." "And what of the land he claimed from your father?" one asked. She looked at Rayhan. "You give it to the children," she said. "Build a school, a real one, not just slates and chalk, a place where girls don't grow up cursed for being born." Abbas bowed his head, and so it was done. A month later, the school's first post was hammered into the earth. The sign, "Read, Kareem Khan School for Daughters of the Desert." Sahira stood beside the post, her hand resting on it. Rayhan stood nearby, quiet as ever. He never asked her to marry him. never even hinted at it. He had given her too much freedom to ever try and take any piece of it back. But that day, Sahira turned to him and said something no one expected. "I don't want a husband," she said. "Not now, not out of gratitude or pity, but I do want someone at my side." Rehan's lips barely moved. "I'm already there." She smiled, not like a girl rescued from darkness, but like a woman who lit her own fire. Years passed. The fig trees bore fruit. The school expanded to include sons and daughters. Some girls rode horses. Some learned to write poetry. Others carved clay and learned to fix things with their hands. Sahira became something rare in the desert, a voice. And Rehan? He became a legend no one ever shouted about, but every child knew his name. When Rehan grew old, he still sat by the same fire. One evening, a child asked him, "Uncle Rehan, why didn't you marry the girl you saved?" He smiled. "She was never mine to save," he said. "She saved herself. I just made sure the wind didn't blow her flame out." Years later, when Rehan was buried beside the ridge, Sahira planted a fig tree over his grave, and beneath it, she left one line carved in stone